I mean, you're the most excellent CDC at the most excellent restaurant in the entire United States of America. So, what are you doing here, I guess?
Making sandwiches.
Like, our show wasn't like a go. It was like, we shot the pilot, we waited around for 6 months to see if we could do the rest kind of thing. The show's about a young chef, Carmen Berzatto, coming home to Chicago after working in these like really intense kitchen environments all over the world, and he comes home and he kind of inherits his family's sandwich shop after his brother passes away.
And everything in the show was inspired by real people and places. The creator, Christopher Storer, grew up in the Park Ridge suburb of Chicago, and even before The Bear, he had directed tons of successful projects. But it is his connection to Chicago that brought the show about.
This is coming from a place of wanting to start fresh and clean.
What was known as the original beef of Chicagoland in season 1 of The Bear was actually inspired by a real restaurant, Mr. Beef on Orleans in River North in Chicago, a spot that originated in 1979, and a huge amount of the show was actually filmed at the original Mr. Beef, but we'll get to that in a moment. The owner of this restaurant, Chris Zucchero, has known Storer since kindergarten. After finishing high school and moving to Los Angeles, Storer stayed in touch with Zucchero by making visits to Mr. Beef whenever he was back in Chicago, and this kept the restaurant in mind for Storer's hit show. According to Zucchero, Storer told him years before the show started, "I'm gonna write about Mr. Beef. I can guarantee you that." According to Variety, Zucchero was actually living in Minnesota when he got wind of the show. He returned to Chicago, and 2 weeks later so did Storer, with plans for a pilot. Zucchero had no problem with filming in the restaurant, but he still says he won't watch the show. "I've never read or watched anything Mr. Beef is on," even though he made a cameo on the show himself in the pilot. As you can see, and according to Storer, every character in the show is someone in my life.
I don't know what, I mean, I have nothing but respect for the restaurant world, the restaurant community. It's no joke.
You got a lot of chef, you got a lot of
I got some
cousins,
cousins.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
See him kind of open up and become a bit more vulnerable and let people in, and I think that was, I don't know, that's a fun thing to play, that change in a person.
The timing for Jeremy Allen White was oddly perfect. After partly working in Chicago on Shameless for 11 seasons, the script for The Bear came his way. According to GQ, he was first unsure about the role, but the writing was too good to turn down. "I knew that if I said no to this, that whoever ended up doing it, I would hate them forever." So, in 2021, it was officially announced Jeremy Allen White would lead the cast of The Bear.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
I'm Sydney.
Io Edebiri acts, writes, and does stand-up comedy.
I was afraid of what teenagers would say online if they saw my regular sneakers, so I bought them 1 hour ago!
She had a solid resume before her breakout role as Sydney, as she was a writer on multiple shows, including Big Mouth, while also voicing the character Missy. Then, in 2021, she sent Storer a self-tape audition for The Bear. She said in one of the scenes she was firing off a lot of orders in the kitchen.
Tina, fire every single chicken we have, please, okay? Richie, do you even know how to do fries?
She had a callback with Storer and showrunner Joanna Kahlo through Zoom, and then flew out to Chicago.
Yo, you ever think about purpose?
In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, Moss-Bachrach said he was focused on the Star Wars show Andor when he first received spec scripts for The Bear, but his agent brought the role back to his attention when he was in London working on Andor, so he ended up doing a Skype audition with Allen White. Moss-Bachrach said he was yelling and cursing during his audition while his daughter was in Zoom class on the other side of the room, but safe to say it all worked out. And the rest of the main cast, including Lionel Boyce as Marcus, Liza Colón-Zayas as Tina, and Abby Elliott as Sugar, found their way onto The Bear in similar fashion, with very strong resumes of their own.
Yo, family's up!
I just never had plátanos with like grass on it.
But getting cast on the show was just the start.
Spent a lot of time, as much as I could, just like being in Chicago for a couple weeks. Spent some time in like Chicago bars. You know, Chicago's like a really great town with like a real strong sense of identity and history.
I've never studied a skill for a role like I did
cooking for this?
All the actors are cooking on their own in the show. Many traveled to go to culinary schools to get training before launching into their chef roles on the show. This includes spots in not only California, but Denmark too.
We did a lot of work. I spent a lot of time in kitchens. The kitchen I spent the most time at was a restaurant in LA called Pas Julie. It's in Santa Monica. Chef Dave Baran is chef there. He's really incredible. They have a star, a Michelin star, which is kind of like the biggest deal in the restaurant world. Everybody was like, this is just some actor. And they didn't really give it any thought. The show hadn't come out. They didn't know anything about the show. So I felt very like, you know, safe there.
According to Vulture, Lionel Boyce, who plays Marcus, traveled to Copenhagen after filming the pilot to train with Richard Hart, a British baker. But that wasn't all. According to Complex, they also added a real chef into the mix to make the show even more real. Canadian chef Matty Matheson. He was added not only as a co-producer, but also as an actor on the show as the handyman. He made sure the actors were pulling believable performances, lingo, and even ways to hold a pan. And for the show itself, it drew inspiration from many different films of the past. A new Mr. Beef was built in Chicago at Cinespace, and they made sure to make it as close as possible to the original. The attention to detail was insane, but the original Mr. Beef was also used for filming.
This was my dad's favorite spot when I was a kid. Come here every Sunday. Special place.
Good.
FX ordered a half-hour-long pilot of the show in early 2021, and so it began. Exteriors of the show were filmed at the real Mr. Beef, and, according to Variety, 90% of the pilot was shot here with everything for the dining room filmed at the original restaurant. Just the back-of-house scenes were done at another kitchen. Chris Storr said the reviews of the pilot were loud and different, but that led to a full series order that came later in 2021, with a release of an 8-episode first season coming for the year 2022. Season 1 of The Bear officially started shooting in February 2022. It was a really cool thing to spend time there. We flew into a blizzard in Chicago.
Chicago, am I right?
While shooting, at the end of each week, according to Lionel Boyce, the cast would get together and get a meal as a group. Season 1 shooting wrapped up in May of that year. How did everyone feel?
It was our last day of shooting The Bear, and I had this really big scene on the last day, and it had kind of been in my head, so there was like quite a build up. I don't think anybody was putting any pressure on me but myself. I really felt like I let everybody down.
It's realistic,
accurate,
stressful,
raw.
But what got me was the deli cups.
Yes.
There's that one scene where he's drinking water out of a deli cup and you're like, oh, they did their homework.
The initial release of the show came at New York's Tribeca Film Festival, with the very first 2 episodes airing there, and then it officially released on Hulu on June 23rd, 2022.
The Bear.
Ayo, Edebiri, the bear.
Jeremy Allen White, the bear.
Thank you, Hollywood Foreign Press. He would always say, stupid. He would always say, let it rip.